3 of the movies that I'm about to review have used the song Holding Out for a Hero. What is going on? Have they all been directed by Shrek? Have they been directed by Shrek? Really? Is that a thing?
Hit it!
No! God, please, no! No!
Welcome back to Torn Apart and to this video, which is called Springtime at the Movies, a video where basically I give you like a lot of different reviews, moving from one genre to the next, from blockbusters to indie gems, so that basically you have something to look forward to, whether you are at home going through different streaming devices or whether you want to go to the cinema. We're gonna be starting with the movie that we've been talking about for so many years. It's the Super Mario Bros. Movie.
They're all counting on us. No pressure.
Long story short, did I enjoy it? Yes, I had a really good time with the movie. Mostly because it's so incredibly beautiful. If there is something you can say about the Illumination Studios, is that I feel like with the Despicable Me franchise, they kind of been taking themselves for granted, meaning that franchise was almost too realistic and it didn't really allow them to go completely insane and to just imagine completely different universes. And here you can really see their talent because this movie looks incredible. I honestly don't remember the last time that I saw an animated movie that looked this good, and the only movie that came to mind immediately was either Disney Pixar's Soul or even Zootopia. Those are the two movies that came to mind immediately when it came out of the cinema. It is a really short movie, it's just 90 minutes, and it's probably the only thing I could criticize about it, because the voice cast is actually incredibly well handled. Jack Black's performance is definitely the one that stands out the most.
Peaches, 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 peaches. Ah!
But honestly, I'm surprised because if you look at the characters, well, they're not that stereotypically Italian in the way that it can become almost very annoying.
Oh, gee, I'm so Italian. I'm the most Italian of them all. Pizza, pasta. Luigi, come here. Say Italian things to the camera. I swear, if you make me speak Italian in this movie, I will murder you.
Ti posso dire una cosa?
Ma certo.
Ma vaffanculo va!
And actually they try to play on that aspect in a very interesting way by using an advert. But I don't want to spoil this movie too much because I really recommend it and I think you should go in it not knowing that much about it at the end of the day. But if you go back to the pacing, it goes from scene to scene quite smoothly and from different set pieces as well. If you're a fan of the games, well, you will recognize a lot of different sequences that they work on here, but also you will be amazed by the amount of complexity and all of the different colors that they put together here. It just looks like almost the most perfect version of the video game itself. I've seen a lot of reviewers out there criticizing the Super Mario movie for being too simple, for not being deep enough, and for not basically giving us something interesting to do as adults when we go to the cinema, but I don't really agree. Mostly because this movie here is adapting the legacy Super Mario games, so the very first games that you used to play in the arcade spaces. So of course, if you look at those characters, if you look at the Super Mario universe back then, it wasn't really that deep and the characters didn't really have that much of a personality. So it makes sense that a movie like this wouldn't really go as deep as some other video games that have come out in the last few years. One that I can think of immediately, for example, would be Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, which is a game that is actually quite interesting, mostly because of its story. But the Super Mario franchise as a video game franchise is never been loved because of its story or even because of its characters, but because of its gameplay and because of the game structure itself. That's why it's so iconic, but that's also why it's so addictive and you don't know why, but you can't stop playing it. So this is basically one of the main critiques that people have. My own critique is that it was too short in the way that it was just rushing from one scene to the next, and I would have liked to spend a little bit more time with these characters, because Princess Peach, for example, feels like a really interesting character that we've never seen before. The core of this movie really relies on the relationship between Mario and Luigi, but Luigi doesn't really get as much time as Mario to shine. There are a couple of moments, for example, there are little winks to different video games that he's been like the solo character of, Luigi's Haunted Mansion, for example, and there are moments where you could feel that you could spend some time solo with him, so that basically he would have to overcome his fears, because he's a very fearsome character. That's his character trait, that's something that he has to overcome, but it never actually happens. As soon as it feels like the movie is about to give us some quality time with Luigi, well, it just moves away to more interesting things going on with Mario and Peach, and I felt like that was a bit of a shame. That's basically the main critique that I have with this film, but literally didn't even knock a star, because I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars review on Letterboxd, which is a really high score when you think about it.
Here we go!
But the thing is, this movie is fun. This movie just made me lose myself in a universe that I knew, and of course there's a lot of nostalgia and a lot of interesting things going on with the music, for example, the soundtrack, but at the end of the day I really felt like they just created and they packaged a really interesting journey for the characters and for the audience members as well. There are a lot of people, for example, who compare this movie to other like adaptations, for example Detective Pikachu, showing how it is possible to make a video game adaptation of a child-oriented property and to actually give it a bit more depth and more meaning. But the problem with that comparison is that, well, the Detective Pikachu movie and, well, the Pokemon franchise overall has always relied on storytelling. If you just look at the amount of episodes, if you just look at the amount of anime movies that they've made, there is a lot of storytelling going on when it comes to the video game franchise, and it's not the same with Super Mario. So I feel like that comparison doesn't work really well. If I had to compare it to something else in the industry, I would compare it to the Angry Birds movie, even though the Angry Birds movie is incredibly bad. But in the same way, this movie adapts a concept that is actually incredibly easy to explain, but it does it so well that you kind of lose yourself in it, and you can't shake that feeling that you're just becoming a child once again.
Hey, it's a me, Mario. Let's eat a mushroom. Delish, delish. No, it's a making me stomach all grumbly. This mushroom, it's gonna give me the poo-poos.
The next movie that I wanted to talk about is Tetris, and I put them right next to each other because, well, they come from around the same time span. In the Tetris movie they talk about Nintendo, they talk about Atari, the golden age basically of video game industry and the video game competition, the first handheld consoles coming out and stuff like that. But the thing that I enjoyed the most about this movie is that it's not just the biopic.
Oh, come on. You guys are the kings of cliffhangers.
Not too bad.
It's not just telling the story of Tetris, how it was created, how it became incredibly popular, why everybody loves it. No, it goes way deeper than that. Actually, the movie turns into a weird political thriller taking place during the fall of the Soviet Union and how much of a disaster that period of time was, and also how much change was created just by the tiniest things ever. And because of all of that context, the movie ends up becoming so incredibly interesting, and it doesn't just become like an adaptation of a Wikipedia page, for example. The performances are quite good at the end of the day. One thing that I loved about this movie, it's that they actually tried to embrace like the style of Tetris, and they applied some special effects to different cars, to different buildings, while they're doing transition shots, for example, to make them pixelated so that they would look like a Tetris game or a Tetris landscape. And those moments are actually quite cool, and those Those are the things that I like when it comes to biopics, when you can really feel that you're not only telling a story, but you're embracing the time period where that story was taking place to actually be in it and live through it as an audience member. But I'm not really that surprised at the end of the day, because the movie is directed by Jon S Baird, who is the director behind the movie Filth, which is an adaptation of the same guy who wrote Trainspotting, and it's starring James McAvoy. And Filth is yet another incredibly weird movie that is really well edited and that has a really strong directorial visual style.
Bigger pain, bigger jar, bigger pills, Bruce, yeah!
I'm really looking forward to see what this director will do in the next few years, because honestly this movie was a surprise hit for me. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, and I didn't give it a perfect score mostly because I felt that it had some pacing issues, and maybe it would have been even better if it was 90 minutes instead of getting so close to the 2-hour mark. The next movie I wanted to talk about is a French movie, so stay there, don't move, because it's actually relevant for you guys.
Any of you fucking pricks move, and I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
I want to talk about this movie because it's incredibly fun, and at the end of the day it represents everything that I want from the French cinematic industry.
T'as l'air d'avoir du cœur.
This movie is called Apaches, and it's basically taking place in the 1900s. Paris is in the hands of an ultra-violent gangs that reign terror on the capital, and they're called the Apaches. The main character is ready to do anything to avenge the death of a brother, and she tries to join the gang to infiltrate it to achieve that goal, basically. There are a lot of problems with this movie, but at the end of the day, it's so visually breathtaking. The special effects are honestly incredible by French standards, of course. Don't compare this movie to like big blockbusters that you could see like in the US, for example. Compare this to other blockbusters that you might have seen coming from Europe, for example. This is a movie that has so much style, so much fun, so much gore, and so much blood and violence, but at the end of the day it doesn't really have a very tight story, because the plot synopsis I gave you like a couple of seconds ago, it's exactly what happens in the movie. There are no surprises. It's a revenge movie, so of course everything that you expect it to do, it does it by the end of the movie. They tried like to make us sympathize with the Apache, mostly because they are a symbol of nihilism and anarchy, and funny enough it's a very relevant like topic to talk about today. If you look at all the protests that are going on in Paris right now, for example, in the last few months, it's the perfect movie.
Pas mal, non? C'est français.
But at the end of the day, it was so incredibly rushed, because this is also like a 90 minutes approximately movie, that you didn't really have the time to feel for these people, even though the cast is quite eclectic. Same goes with the characters themselves, but all of them, they can be summed up in just one sentence. They don't really have their own arc. They're just there to look cool, basically, which is something that happens very often in action movies and very often in these kind of weird period dramas that are not really that historically accurate. This reminds me, for example, of the Italian movie Freaks Out, so if you enjoyed that one, I have a review for it on my channel as well. You might enjoy Apache as well. But the main reason why I still want to recommend this movie despite its many flaws, it's because, well, the French industry is populated by incredibly forgettable, incredibly cheap looking dramas and comedies.
All inclusive. Toute ressemblance. Made in China. La vérité si je manque 3. Just a gigolo. Rendez-vous chez les Malawas. C'est de la merde. Quoi?
And honestly, as I came out of the cinemas, I was like, I would rather get one of these movies and delete from history 3 of those incredibly forgettable like dramas. And even though it's flawed, it's definitely way more ambitious, it's definitely way more fun. Have those kind of movies instead of not having them, you know? People have been hating this movie so much on Letterboxd if you go through different reviews, but honestly, as a French audience member, I had a lot of fun. And you have to take that into consideration. Even though a movie can be flawed, if you have fun, and if you can forgive a lot of its flaws, it's still worth something. And I really don't understand why people like gave it like a 0.5 out of 5 stars, which is an insane rating to give to a movie, unless it's like the most garbage thing you've ever seen. Like, I think it gave that score to like Mortal Instruments or something like that, which we can all agree it's a garbage movie on any kind of aspect possible. The next movie I wanted to talk about is Shazam 2: Fury of the Gods.
I just threw a truck at a dragon. I love my life.
I've been delaying this review for such a long time because everybody was hating on it and I didn't really understand why. But when I saw it and I was like, I get it. But at the same time, I've seen so many videos on YouTube saying, who cares? Like, this is the perfect example of a DCU movie where you sit there and you don't know exactly why you're supposed to care about these people, why you're supposed to care about this movie within the larger universe, because it doesn't make any sense, because James Gunn is like restructuring everything, so this movie will not matter in the end and in the next few years as well.
Nobody cares.
But it's not a problem. You could say, who cares about most movies? Like, who cares about telling this story? Who cares about seeing this type of movie? You could say that about anything. So I thought that it was like an incredibly weak argument, because at the end of the day, you could say that about the first Shazam movie as well. Who cared about Shazam? Who cared about his story, especially when it felt so derivative back then, where we were exactly at the center of Zack Snyder DCU, and the movie felt incredibly weird in contrast with all of that kind of stuff. I loved the first Shazam mostly because it was so fun, but also because it had a bit of an edge to it, right? A bit of a horror edge, because David F Sandberg is actually a horror director who is the director behind the movie Lights Out, which is a movie that still today I find so incredibly terrifying, but because I'm scared of the dark, not necessarily because it's the most perfect movie ever. Just to say that that aspect is not really present in this movie anymore, unless you look at the final act where there are some weird creatures coming to play and to kill our main characters, and those are weird Lovecraftian things, but they also remind me a bit too much of like Percy Jackson. They didn't work hard enough on the creature designs and well, on this entire movie at the end of the day. The CGI, like for Ant-Man Quantumania, feels incredibly half-assed. Like, honestly, there are some shots where they're flying around the city where you see like the CGI buildings around them. You can tell it's fake. You can really tell it's fake, so of course I understand why would you care about a movie that looks like this. And also they took the most interesting aspect from the first movie, which is the dichotomy between being a teenager and being able to transform into an adult, to look like an adult and to have all of the advantages that an adult body can give you. They almost completely deleted that aspect from the second movie, to the point that there are some actors that we see mostly in adult forms, and the teenagers, the children, are actually almost absent completely from the story. And it really sucks, because that part there was exactly what made it feel like a special occasion, a special movie that didn't really look like all of the other superhero movies out there, and they took that out as well. Zachary Levi is probably the only person who can save this movie, because he's 100% committed to looking as ridiculous as possible. But at the same time, this movie is not really about him. It's supposed to be about teenager Billy Batson, and once again, I'm really sorry to say that he's not really the main character, and he's being overshadowed by almost everyone, including himself. Jack Dylan Glazer, for example, in this movie, he proves once again that he should have been the main character. He is clearly the best at this superhero stuff. He's also the most quirky teenager ever. He's really funny as well. He's not only the sidekick, it really feels like he's driving the narrative most of the times, and the movie really behaves like he's the main character at the end of the day, even though he's not.
Are there any other DC heroes in the film that people can expect to see? Yes, the whole Justice League is in the movie, and we all die in the end.
Yeah. And also, a really huge problem that this movie has is the fact that it has a big cast. They add even more people into it, but they completely forgot, for example, to give the main cast actual character arcs and to work on the character development that had been established in the first movie. Most of the children, most of the teenagers, we don't really know what they are doing in this movie. We don't really know how they have changed or matured since the first movie came out, and it really sucks because, well, teenagers and children tend to change so quickly, especially in those very formative years. The thing that really doesn't work about this movie is also the cameos and the little hints to the larger DCU. There are two scenes where Wonder Woman is present, and those are the most despicable scenes I've ever seen. The first scene is kind of like a joke that they're trying to recreate from the post-credit scene from the first movie, where you can't really see like the head of the person who is actually standing there, but it doesn't work at all, and it's not funny, and it makes no sense for Wonder Woman as a character as well, even though it's like a weird dream sequence. Same goes for the ending, and this is why I'm like, this movie kind of represents everything wrong with the DCU, but also everything wrong with superhero movies just in general. This movie literally has no stakes. We don't really know why they're fighting the villains, because at the same time they're coming from a completely different universe, and they're not even villains at the end of the day, because if you look at it from a different perspective, if basically the family of superheroes didn't do anything since the beginning, it is very possible that they would just steal the seed of life, go back home and just plant the seed of life, and that would be it. There would be no revenge, there would be no plot. This movie will not even exist, if you know what I mean. So this movie is already relying on incredibly weak villains, but also the sacrifices that are established in this movie, they don't really pay off, because no one can die and no one can get hurt, unless you're a villain, of course. The scene with Wonder Woman in the end is completely useless, and it makes no sense at all for her to know where to be and where to go to save this person here, or to give them back their magic. It just makes no sense on why or how she would be able to do all of that kind of stuff. And it's a bit of a shame, because if you know that this might be the last movie ever, why won't you go 100% with it? Why don't you take risks? Why don't you try to tell a really interesting story with our characters? And that's the main thing that I think a lot of people hated about this movie, how incredibly pointless it felt. It was behaving like it was a DCU movie within a DCU movie that still existed, even though it's not the case anymore. And it really sucks, because if you are in a boat that is about to sink, you might as well just have a good time.
F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for anywhere and anytime at all.
Down here in the deep blue sea.
And it's not the thing that they did here with Shazam 2. And at the end of the day, that's the most disappointing thing about it. Now we're talking about Rye Lane, which is a really cute independent movie that I discovered by chance while I was searching on different streaming services. It's directed by Raine Allen-Miller.
Are you sure you're down for this?
Yeah.
By the way, your man swiped me on Tinder like a week ago.
No, I didn't. I didn't swipe you.
Give me your phone.
Or anybody.
Now.
The thing that I loved about this movie is that even though it has an incredibly simple storyline, at the end of the day, it's the directorial aspect, it's the visual styles, it's the creative input that makes this film incredibly memorable and a really good time at the end of the day. Just in case you would like to know what this movie is about, and if you would love to seek it out, here's a little synopsis. Two 20-something, both reeling from bad breakups, connect over the course of an eventful day in South London, helping each other deal with their nightmare exes and potentially restoring their faith in romance. Yes, this might be one of the most original and fun romantic comedies that I've seen in a really long time. It has great representation because both main characters are black. It really feels like it's taking place in our real contemporary world, which is something that in romantic comedies sometimes it doesn't happen. It feels like it's taking place in like a parallel universe where having a job is incredibly easy, having a huge apartment is incredibly easy, and yeah, basically all the characters are living on easy mode so that they can go and seek out and do weird things for their romantic partners. No, this movie actually takes place in the real world. I actually recognize a lot of places from London as well. This film actually represents London the way that it's supposed to look, instead of representing it like if you were a tourist, basically. So if you're English, you're probably gonna love this movie. You're gonna feel like it's very genuine, and if you're an international audience member, you'll probably like it because you will feel feel really fresh and really authentic in comparison to other incredibly superficial things that Netflix keeps releasing, or they keep going for no reason whatsoever to cinemas in the United States. If you like movies like Boots Riley's Sorry to Bother You, I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy this. Not necessarily because of the tone or the story, but because of the strong visual style. I really recommend this movie. This is the only movie that gets the perfect score from me, so a 5/5 on Letterboxd, because honestly, there is nothing wrong with it. It's just a perfect, fun, nice movie. And of course, I couldn't end this video without recommending another South Korean action movie, because honestly, I dig those. I really dig those, whether they are flawed or not. I feel like South Korean movies, they always have an interesting edge to them. Today I'm talking about the Netflix production called Kill Boksoon, and I gave it a 4/5 stars on Letterboxd.
아무도 모르면 그게 아무 일도 없는 거야.
Honestly, this is my John Wick. Like, everyone is talking about John Wick 4. Is it 4 or 5? I don't even know at this point, because I don't really care about John Wick anymore.
How dare you?
They keep replaying the same story, the same beats over and over again. At this point, it's just nice looks, nice fights, nice stunts, which you can get if you play a video game, I guess. But anyways, so I was really looking forward to seeing this movie because it feels like John Wick, but at the same time, it actually gives you the story, it gives you the characters, it gives you something to be emotionally attached to, unlike John Wick's characters, for example, that are just as disposable as the millions of people that he kills. The movie is directed by Byun Sung-Hyun, who is the director from the 2017 movie The Merciless, which I still haven't seen, but I'm really looking forward to seeing it as well. And basically, if you'd like to know what this is about, it's about a renowned assassin who, at home, she's a single mom to a teenage daughter, but in her spare time, or full time technically, she is a serial killer working for basically a conglomerate of other serial killers. It's very capitalist, it's very organized and unionized. It's really funny, but it reminds me of John Wick as well.
따님이 다행히 엄마를 닮았나 봐요. 근데 너무 우울해 보인다. 웃으면 더 이쁠 텐데. 그러게 자연사 하시려면 조금 착하게 사셨어야죠. 이제 의자만 빼면 끝나요.
This is why I tend to recommend the South Korean movies so much lately in the last few years, and anyways, because the writing is always impeccable and they have such an incredible grasp of dramatic irony. For example, there is a scene where two of the main characters are basically having like a heart-to-heart conversation while one of them is cleaning up after a double murder that he just committed, which is literally the funniest thing ever. And this is why I love this movie, because it makes like killing and it makes all of this world like feel so incredibly relatable without taking all the cool aspects from it, because it's incredibly stylized when it comes to the action sequences. There is a lot of really cool long takes in this movie that will basically scratch that itch at the back of your mind that you're looking for when it comes to action movies. But at the same time, it's not like a female version of John Wick like Atomic Blonde, for example. This is a movie that actually has a female character at its center that has wants, has needs, and is trying to be the best person that she can be. This also is an interesting movie when it comes to looking at friendships within like the workplace basically, and how they can be incredibly superficial and they can be actually fake, especially when it gets down to losing your job, for example, or earning a promotion. There is a lot of themes like that in this movie that are so fascinating. The ending is also kind of open-ended, so it feels like they're looking to make another movie, a sequel, and honestly, I would really dig that. The only reason why I didn't give this movie a perfect score, it's that it has a bit of pacing issues. Of course, it takes time to actually develop the relationship between the mother and the daughter. There is some representation as well when it comes to a lesbian couple, which is something that actually I've never seen in other K-dramas or K-action movies or even K-sci-fi movies. It felt very fresh and it felt very relatable for the world that we're living in today. But the movie kind of like forgets that it's an action serial killer movie, and it kind of dwells a bit too much in that kind of drama, to the point that you kind of lose the point of the main plot, basically. This should have been 90 minutes. Like, this is the main theme when it comes to this video. Some movies need to be 90 minutes, some movies need more. This movie needed to be 90 minutes to be perfect. By the way, if you wanted to know which one of the movies that I talked about today actually had the Shrek song, I was referring to Shazam, Tetris, and the Super Mario Bros. Movie. All of those movies use the Holding Out for a Hero song, and we need to put it to rest. Like, honestly, why? Why are you so obsessed with that song, especially when it was made so incredibly iconic by Shrek?
Shrek punched near kid's chest, pulled out his heart, and replaced it with an onionade. The kid exploded.
Triple kill.
Anyways, those are all the reviews that I had for today. Let me know down in the comments if you saw any of these films and if you liked them, if you hated them, or if you're gonna check them out. If you liked this video, last week I made a really interesting video about potential mediocre movies that really desperately need a remake. I talked about Aragon, for example, but I also talked about another controversial pick, Disney Pixar's Brave. If you'd like to know why I think that movie needs to be remade, give that video a watch. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every single like that you drop will go to Bowser himself, and he will write you a personalized song if you like this video. I will make sure of it, and it will just be repeating your first name over and over again. For example, Mike, 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 Mike. There, that's what he will do for you if you like this video. Anyways, I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Love really makes a guy come out of his shell.